Okay. It's been a while since I've done a life update, mostly because I'm partially still avoiding solo podcasting, but we're going to do it. So, if you see the glitter on my face and if you could see the absolute chaos that's going on in the background here, I have a Princess Peach stuffed animal, a boa, rainbow panda ears. This is because I just recorded with Dingus and Zazzy, which, if you haven't listened to my episode with them, it's honest to God my favorite one. I've never laughed harder while editing something. I couldn't get through editing because I would be sitting at my co-working space laughing my ass off. Anyways, today I want to talk about the 6 stages of identity change because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So I got this framework from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which is really all over the zeitgeist right now because Dochi did a video going week by week. It's a 12-week curriculum that's like written into a book about unlocking your creativity. And it has been kind of a game changer for me, to be honest. I've talked about this a little bit, but I've been creating a grad school program for myself. So I'm in a creator MBA basically, or a multi-hyphenate MBA. So what that's looked like is I joined a space called the Lighthouse. That's like absolutely one of the best decisions I've ever made. I'm part of 150 founding members for this like educational program. We're in a private clubhouse in Venice. They're also opening a space in Greenpoint. We're taking like a slew of classes every week and getting access to the head of podcasting for iHeartRadio, a YouTube strategist, editing people. We're having famous artists come in, like Will Smith is coming to do a listening party on Monday. It's just basically, I think whenever you're trying to learn a new skill, I really can never say enough about like putting yourself in community around other people who are doing that. It's a game changer. So I've signed up for that and I'm doing that. And it was like really special to get into that program and get to join it. I signed up with Whitney Euland, who is my coach in a group mastermind. She does this really unique approach to understanding, like helping people through mindset of how to show up on camera. So basically like getting over everyone's fear of being seen and everyone freezing up when they get a microphone in front of their face, like me. I've been reading The Artist's Way and taking myself through that curriculum. And then I've been doing a lot of sort of as little educational opportunities pop up, like just been jumping on them. So someone sent me an AI filmmaking course. I took a like severing workshop that was like how to sort of clear out old stuff. If you're following me on Instagram, I did this huge poetry project and that's been, I'm going to talk about that in a second, like a really interesting deep dive into a side of myself that I never show publicly. And so the experience of being like actually vulnerable, not just using that word, but like actually it feels like I'm dying posting this vulnerable. And yeah, just any other educational, I mean, any book that people are recommending me. I think everyone knows I'm in sponge mode right now. So friends are just sending me stuff right and left. And so it's been really fun to be learning. And I want to get better at sharing some of that stuff as I'm intaking it. So for instance, the iHeart podcasting people, when they came last week, shared this really interesting tidbit with us that because of the state of politics and the world and how much is going on, people are just burnt out. Like everyone feels some level of burnt out and overwhelmed and doesn't want to add more heaviness to their life. And so the content that they're greenlighting right now and what they're seeing take off is entertainment and escapism and humor and making people laugh. And even naturally, as soon as they said that, I was like, that's what I've been feeling called to. Like, I think I'm more attracted to humor right now. So okay. Anyways, I want to talk today about the 6 stages of any identity change because I think that's something I've been working through. And it's been really interesting to have this framework because I think when you're going through this solo, like it can kind of feel like you're losing your mind. And without having someone to tell you, oh, that's like exactly where you're supposed to be and exactly the correct next step, it's sort of, you can feel adrift. So going through this, and I'm staring at a PowerPoint that I made for a reel you will see on Instagram. First stage, excitement. So I'm obviously talking about this specifically in context of essentially entrepreneurship, like choosing to break the corporate mold, go out on my own. And that's the change for me, is putting myself in front of the camera instead of being this idea of a shadow artist, which is, I'm going to say just like, for me, it was sort of shadow entrepreneur, but shadow artist is the term that's used. Like when you're circling the thing that you actually want to be, maybe you're a publisher, but you secretly want to be a writer, or you're an agent, but you secretly want to be an actor. You're circling the thing you want to be because it's a safe way of touching the dream without being in it. And for me, as someone who was running community for entrepreneurs for years, that was definitely what was happening. I was like, maybe if I'm just around a lot of entrepreneurs, I will suddenly just absorb their entrepreneurialness and just suddenly wake up and be one day. When the reality is you have to actually just make choices and there's no right time. You have to just get over the hump. But anyways, all right. So the 6 stages. Number 1, excitement. So this is a stage where Maybe you've left a relationship, you've left a job, you've made a new decision. Like it's when you've broken the initial pattern. So there's some kind of pattern break. And so what you're filled with is possibly defiance, excitement, giddiness. Like there's a lot of joy. It's a really exciting stage. And there's also all these new ideas and new experiences, maybe, and new thoughts and new fantasies about the future. And it feels like really joyful. So then the second stage is kind of an interesting one to hit, which is anger, grief, emotional reprocessing. So amidst this giddiness, all of a sudden old feelings start to come up, old memories for me, particularly in my version of this. This is like, oh, I have all this free space that I haven't had in years because I've been feeding so much of my energy into other systems, right? Like I'm in the work world, I'm working for companies. And so a lot of my energy is constantly going into other systems, and there's always more work to do, more to do. And so there isn't as much reflection space. Even as someone who goes to therapy and really values self-reflection, there was stuff that was still sitting in my body that I didn't realize. And so I personally got hit with just like a wave of grief. I think for other people that can look like anger or sadness. I feel like the last chapter of my life started in during COVID and like early COVID. My whole life got turned upside down within the course of a year. A lot of relationships changed, friendships changed, where I was living changed, like what I was doing changed, and there was still, which I didn't realize, a lot of grief sitting in my body about certain breakups that had happened, and it just sort of was like it was like over the course of a couple weeks, I was crying all the time, and I don't cry that often. It was just happening. And I was like, what is happening to me? Or I'd be like driving somewhere in LA where you're sitting in traffic for an hour and some song would come on my iPhone, like a random song, and I would just start crying. And I was like, what's happening to me? Am I losing it? Like, why am I leaking? Like, what's going on? And then I'm in a poetry class with this woman named Chelsea Diane, who I can't recommend enough. Her account is called Poems and Peonies, and she has this excellent class, Poems and Power, where she teaches poetry and empowerment through all of these famous women in history. And so we were doing this poetry exercise it was a week dedicated to Taylor Swift. So I listen to Taylor Swift like pretty regularly, but I started actually kind of listening. We started with Tortured Poets Department. We had a certain like layout of songs to listen to that were just the most gut wrenching, like tough songs. Tolerate It, if you haven't heard it, devastating. The live version with the music video, Jesus Christ, absolutely gutted me. I think I listened to that on repeat for 4 hours, just bawling. It just basically washed up all of like full teenager mode, just like a slew of emotions in this huge soup. And I felt this urge to write all this poetry, which is something I've done since I was a kid, but I've never shared poetry publicly. That's something that literally like 3 people in my life have ever seen. And I always had this voice in my head that was just like, people will think you're fucking crazy if you share your poetry, or like we'll see a side of you. Like, it's the too muchness that comes up. The like, oh, if someone actually sees what goes on in my head, they're going to hate me. So I started writing, and it just sort of became this bigger project. And I ended up being like, I want to pair a collage with each one of these poems because the poems alone aren't doing the full processing for me. It feels like this needs to be like a big moment. I'm like pulling it all up. A friend of mine called it cleaning out the emotional closet, like taking everything out and reorganizing it. So I ended up printing. I collage a lot. I use sticker paper that I pull images and then print out on the sticker paper, cut those out and do it. 45 pages worth of images. And my living room turned into this giant art project. Like it was literally covered in photos that I had cut up and collage things and magazine things. And each one was like labeled with different piles of X's and situations that I was still processing and whatever. And then worked through basically like writing the poetry to a point that I felt good about, which was not 100% because I think just getting it out felt more important. And then pairing them with images and creating this book that I actually made, like a physical book. And then realizing that I wanted to break my own internal pattern, like a pattern break for me, and share all of that online. So like I picked like 5 or 6 poems. I don't think I've ever felt more afraid in my life. I mean, it's also hard because when you're storytelling, to tell your own stories, it inherently involves other people. But I don't have any desire to like hate on or pull down or pull up stuff from other people's stories. It's inherently, unfortunately, part of my story too. So I can't help that to tell my own worlds, like to share my inner world, it's going to involve other people. So anyways, I put that out. It was very scary. Did it over the course of 5 days. It was the most like intense, emotional. If you've ever had a vulnerability hangover, it was 5 days straight of just like ripping everything out of my soul and into like this vulnerable space. And then immediately, the day after I finished, woke up with COVID. I was down bad for 8 days. I think it's the sickest I've been in years. And of course, like, my spiritual friends are like, your body is purging, like the throat chakra is clearing as I'm like hacking and dying. Um, Anyways, so we have been on stage 2, anger and grief, and I'm telling this through my story, and then we move to stage 3. I call it the tilt-a-whirl. You could also call it the roller coaster, but basically it's this moment of joy, panic, or hope, fear, this kind of up and down period where you're just like, what the fuck am I doing in the midst of this identity change? So for me, as I came out the other side of COVID, having had my whole life just stopped for 8 days and also been so sick, getting back into the work felt really challenging. I felt blocked. I felt grumpy. I felt claustrophobic and stir crazy for being inside for so many days. I was like, I hate my house. I want to fly somewhere else. And then amidst that, as I was touching back into the work, I was just like, I'm done. Nothing changed. I did this huge project. I like gutted my insides and there was no immediate external validation. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I had several days of that. Then I saw a friend who is also in this space who talked me through some of like her past. And as she talked about that, it sort of cleared out stuff in me and I felt hope. And then and then the next day I was like, and I'm grumpy again. And then the next day I went for a walk and happened to run into this space that was a pop-up near my house for Chrissy Teigen's new podcast that had like a sound bath and an astrologist doing free readings, very LA. I ended up sitting down and I personally don't usually vibe with astrology readings. And this woman just was like amazing and chatted with me for like over an hour. And we did some photography together and it was very fun. That like restored me where I was like, oh, this feels like, and so it's just been this up and down, tilt-a-whirl. And what Julia Cameron says on this is the moment where a lot of people start to be like, I'm going to go backwards. Like I'm quitting this, whatever. But if you push through, you move to stage 4, the desire to U-turn, which is exactly that. So this is, it's like the stages of grief. This is the bargaining stage. This is where you're like, you know what? For me in an entrepreneurial journey, it looks like I'm going to get a job. For someone else, it might look like I'm going to go back to an old relationship, or I'm going to reach out to someone who used to be comforting to me, or go back to an old vice, or, whatever. Some desire to U-turn, to return to a familiar experience, to feel grounded and calm. I don't think people often talk about how like following your dreams is so idealized and put on this pedestal. Like every step of it is magical and amazing. All the entrepreneurial stories you hear, even when you hear about the struggle periods, it's like, but it all worked out in the end and happily ever after. And realizing that actually like you have to just have an insane amount of resilience and trust in what is an extremely messy moment. Like this is the messy middle. This is where you don't know if the work you're doing is paying off to anything. Like, is anyone watching this? Is anything happening? Is anything changing? I'm like committed to the process, and I have trust sort of in an intuitive way, but I don't really understand where it's going. Okay. The desire to U-turn. Number 5, surrender. This is where you say, fuck it, burn the ships. We're going to the new world. I'm doubling down on the process. I'm recommitting and kind of continuing to go in. By the way, that's really fucking hard to do, but we do that, which moves us into the final stage, step 6, the new self. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's actually getting grounded in a brand new identity, the word consciousness is so overused, but consciousness in the sense of the experience that you have every day genuinely looks different. Maybe that's the way that you view things. Maybe that's what your actual experience is because you used to be doing this kind of a job and now you're doing that kind of a job. And it really changes how you interact with the world and how you experience every day. I feel like I'm oscillating between stages 3 and 5 right now. Like, I don't think it's, it's nice to think about these being exactly linear, but I think sometimes I'm in stage 3. I am up and down. Sometimes I'm debating a U-turn all the time. By the way, I think that's super normal. Like I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday and she's been in her company for a year. She's making great money. She's thinking about having kids. And she was like, yeah, I want to get a job, but I know I shouldn't. But there's a part of me that wants to. And it's a weird experience to be outside of the norms. Let's go through this one more time. We've got the 6 stages of identity change. Number 1, excitement. Number 2, emotional reprocessing. Number 3, the tilt-a-whirl, the roller coaster. Number 4, the U-turn. Number 5, surrender. And number 6, the new world. So this is kind of what we're working with. I'm still in this process and in this journey. And right now, my main commitment is just learning. Like I'm learning a new skill and doing it in public. And the new skill is the doing it in public, right? So there's like a lot of fun meta stuff here. This is the first solo podcast I've recorded since one that I recorded where I think I talked for like an hour and cut it down to 4 minutes because it was so hard for me. This one I'm like, I don't think I'm really going to edit it. I'm talking straight. So we're getting better day by day. And yeah, and I think, one of the other things I've been thinking about is noticing this pattern of the things that I desire also scare me. So like I love podcasting. Like whenever I actually get into flow on a podcast, I feel genuinely in a flow state. But then when I think about scheduling an episode or trying to get kind of more things on the calendar around it or sitting down and doing it, I get really precious with it. It feels like, oh, well, like what goes through my head is, well, I'm nervous about it. So I need to have the entire day free. Like I can't have anything that morning. I can't have anything else going on because I need to just have all the spaciousness so that I can mentally prepare for it, which by the way is just like a trap. I need to just jump in and not think about it. But I need to have all the space for it in order to like do it well. And then I end up just not doing it because I'm like, well, I have a meeting every day next week. Like there's or I have a class or something. I'm like, I have something. So I'm just not going to record and it's fine. I'm in the recommitting to the process and continuing to do it and continuing to show up because I keep going through the cycle of like a lot of what I'm attracted to is being on camera. And then the second those options and offers are available, I like freeze up and I want to avoid them. I want to cancel. I don't want to go. I don't want to do it. And then once I'm there, I love it. It's kind of like going to the gym a little bit. Anyways, those are my updates. The creative journey is bizarre and interesting and really day by day. I think I will say like what I'm really excited about right now is just getting to learn. It's been so many years since I have had it's like the greatest freedom and privilege on the planet to not have any other responsibilities right now for like like I've given myself like 6 months of runway to just be able to absorb and like have all these small learning opportunities come up again, whether that's listening to a podcast, a book, the classes that I'm getting to take through Lighthouse, which I can't say enough amazing things about that space. It's really a joy. So I'll be back to share more of what I'm learning as I keep taking these classes. I'm jumping off now to go to a session that is an investor group that's talking about how investors work with creators and what that kind of new space looks like and investing in creator-led businesses. So it's been a joy. We'll talk to you guys soon.